Sometimes the deepest pain doesn't scream, it whispers silently, deep within the soul. It's a strange feeling, as if something is missing, even when everything seems to be in place. As if life continues on its course, but within, an empty space remains untouched. Many live this way. They work, smile, make plans. But at night, or in the early morning, they feel there's something greater that hasn't been accessed. An unanswered call. An absence that isn't a lack of something external, but the absence of a more intimate connection with who one truly is. This is the functional, spiritual void. A name for that which no one sees, but which pulsates within so many. It's like walking down a straight road, knowing that at some point there was a fork in the road that wasn't chosen. As if life had moved on, but your soul had remained elsewhere, waiting for you. It's not discouragement. It's not sadness. It's a nameless longing. A longing for what has not yet been experienced, but which the heart knows exists. Bruce Lipton invites us to look at this discomfort with the eyes of science and soul. He explains that from childhood, we are programmed by beliefs that distance us from our intuition. We grow up hearing what we should be, what is safe, what is possible. And in this process, the call fades into oblivion. Not because it ceases to exist, but because our subconscious learns to ignore it. It remains there, vibrating, but at a frequency that can only be heard in the inner silence, the one that almost no one allows themselves to inhabit. Neville Goddard offers us another perspective on being chosen, not as a gift reserved for a few, but as an internal decision, a vibrational availability. For him, the chosen one is the one who awakens to their ability to imagine and experience life from its highest expression. It's not a matter of merit, but of alignment. And this alignment begins the moment someone decides to stop denying what they feel and begins to listen to what vibrates. But there's a subtle obstacle that many don't realize: false spiritual humility. The idea that we're not good enough to be instruments of something greater. This belief, often fraught with guilt, isn't humility. It's conditioning. It's a learned response. It's the echo of voices that throughout life have told you you need to improve greatly to be worthy. But the truth is different. It's not about being perfect. It's about being available. Because the calling doesn't seek perfection, it seeks openness. This video is not an exaltation of those who were chosen. It is a revelation of what this calling truly is. It doesn't come like a thunderclap. It doesn't require proof. It manifests as a subtle desire to go beyond what is visible, as a nagging urge, as a yearning to reconnect. The calling is energetic. It's neurochemical, and it happens every day. For those who begin to listen with their hearts more than their ears, for those who realize that living a lifetime without listening is the true loss, and that listening, even without understanding everything, is already the first step to remembering who one is. The silent vibrational block that prevents you from hearing the call. It's not always easy to perceive, but there's a discomfort that doesn't come from the world, nor from circumstances. It arises within, a persistent uneasiness that seems to have no precise origin, but insists on being there. A restlessness that disguises itself as anxiety, fatigue, or frustration. Many interpret this feeling as failure, as inability, as something wrong with themselves. But what few realize is that this discomfort can actually be a calling. The call doesn't come as a clear voice. It doesn't knock on the door with clear words. It vibrates. It vibrates in the form of subtle dissatisfaction, in unwarranted boredom, in the feeling that something is about to happen but never reveals itself. It settles in the silences of the soul, like someone whispering from within. There's something beyond. You feel it, don't you? But the noise of life, of obligations, fears, and haste often drowns out this whisper until it almost disappears. Bruce Lipton explains that our subconscious, if not consciously reprogrammed, rejects any information that contradicts the inherited belief system. It's as if there were an invisible filter programmed in childhood that says, "This doesn't make sense, this isn't safe, this isn't possible." And so, even if the call exists, even if it touches your most subtle vibration, the subconscious censors it. It ignores it. It silences it. And you continue to live as if nothing else exists. But there is. And what exists beyond doesn't require effort, doesn't require performance. It requires listening. Because the call doesn't manifest itself to those who perform a spirituality. It manifests itself to those who sustain vibrational sensitivity. And sensitivity isn't weakness, it's openness. It's the ability to feel what doesn't yet have a name, to perceive what doesn't yet reveal itself clearly, to intuit that the soul knows the way, even when the mind is still trying to understand the map. This vibrational blockage isn't broken with force, it dissolves with presence, with the willingness to accept that what's bothering you may not be a mistake, but an invitation to expansion, an invitation to leave survival mode and enter the frequency of inner listening. Because the call isn't something that happens from the outside in. It's already within, just waiting for you to feel it, for you to stop. For you to recognize this slight tremor in your soul as the first sign that the old self is being called to transform. Myth of the special chosen one. The calling is not for a few, it is for those who listen. For a long time, it was believed that only a select few, predestined or spiritually elevated, were chosen for something greater. As if the universe separated some with a sacred touch and left the rest on the margins. But this idea, despite seeming mystical, is a subtle reflection of ancient beliefs. Beliefs that fuel exclusion, comparison, and feelings of unworthiness. The truth is otherwise. The calling is not a prize. It is a frequency, and this frequency is available to everyone. But not everyone is ready or willing to listen. It's not that only 0.1% are chosen. It's that few truly become silent enough to feel the field. Few dare to close their eyes to the external noise and open their senses to what vibrates within. Most remain too busy, too rushed, too rational. Sensitivity is mistaken for weakness. Intuition is discredited. Inner time is neglected. And so the call passes. Like a breeze that few notice. Like a sign that almost no one sees. Neville Goddard teaches that the true power of choice lies not in waiting for something to come from outside, but in activating creative imagination. He says that those who imagine themselves living their highest version are already answering the call, because it's not about being chosen by someone, it's about choosing yourself, choosing to be a channel for a new reality, choosing to be a living expression of an awakened consciousness, choosing to be the one who sustains a new vibration, even when the world still vibrates at the frequency of fear, scarcity, and doubt. The chosen one, then, is not a better being. It's a willing being. It's not the strongest. It's the most sensitive. It's not the one who has all the answers. It's the one who has learned to listen to the right questions. And above all, it's the one who sustains a constant vibration, even when nothing outside seems to confirm that choice. The universe doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you continuously vibrate. The stated intention may be beautiful, but it's the sustained frequency that shapes reality. And this is liberating. Because it doesn't demand past merits. It doesn't demand perfection. It only demands truth. The truth of those who are ready to stop waiting for a call from heaven and begin to respond to the silent whisper that already resides within. The fatal mistake, waiting for a supernatural sign instead of recognizing the subtle signs of everyday life. There's a silent deception that prevents many from answering the call, waiting for something extraordinary. A grand sign, a magical event, a supernatural manifestation that confirms, without a doubt, that the time has come. And while this expectation grows, the true signs go unnoticed, because the call rarely screams. It manifests itself in the repetition of small things, in that feeling of déjà vu, in the discomfort that repeats itself, in the encounters that stir the heart, in the cycles that insist on presenting themselves, until you realize there's a message there. Many live distracted by the search for spectacular miracles, forgetting that the sacred is almost always revealed in the details, in pauses, in delays, in the synchronicity of a phrase heard at just the right moment, in glances that awaken dormant memories, in places that suddenly seem different, as if carrying an invisible presence. And it is in these moments that the call is made, but few have their senses attuned to hear it. Bruce Lipton shows us that the body is the first to pick up vibrational signals. Even before the rational mind tries to understand what's happening, the body has already felt it. It has already reacted. It has already sent subtle messages. A tightness in the chest, a sudden lightness, a change in breathing. But we're so used to ignoring the body that we fail to realize that it's the first to communicate with the physical world. That it's the most sensitive instrument for translating what the soul is trying to communicate. Ignoring this recurring discomfort, this insistent intuition, is like walking through an open door with your eyes closed. The portal is there, but your gaze is turned away. And so we keep asking for signs. While the call has already occurred dozens of times, it just hasn't been acknowledged. The symbolism of Moses before the burning bush reveals something profound to us. What made him chosen was not the phenomenon itself. It was the fact that he stopped, that he looked, that he paid attention to what others might have passed by without noticing. It wasn't the miracle that chose him. It was his conscience that responded, and that is the key. The call is in everything, but it only reveals itself to those willing to see. It's not about expecting something that escapes the laws of nature. It's about realizing that miracles are already happening every day in the very nature of your everyday life, and that the sacred, more often than not, arrives disguised as routine. Because the extraordinary doesn't need to be grand, it just needs to be noticed. And when it is noticed, it changes everything. How to decode the energetic call in your daily life. There is a language that is not spoken with words, but with sensations. A communication that is not written in sentences, but in patterns. And this language is how the calling presents itself every day in your life. It doesn't arrive with ready-made explanations. It reveals itself in the subtlest details. In that moment of unfounded restlessness, in that emotion that recurs in different scenarios, in that uneasiness that insists on arising whenever you ignore something your heart already knows. The first step is to pay closer attention to the moments when something stirs inside, even when, on the outside, everything seems normal. When a slight anguish arises, an inexplicable tightness, a desire to withdraw, to silence, to rethink. This is not weakness. This is a vibrational field in motion. It's your soul signaling that something needs to be heard. It's the energetic whisper trying to break through the barrier of mental noise. Then start noticing what patterns repeat situations, themselves. Phrases, places, encounters that somehow trigger the same emotional response in you. Maybe it's impatience. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's even a sudden expansion. When this pattern starts to emerge frequently, it's pointing to something that needs to be transcended, something that needs closure, or maybe something that needs to be embraced with greater presence. And then comes the essential question. A simple yet transformative question. What am I being called to abandon or transcend here? Because the call rarely asks you to add one more thing to your life. It almost always asks you to leave something behind. An old idea about yourself, an inherited belief, a role that no longer makes sense, a fear you've learned to call detection. The call is an invitation to the symbolic death of the self you no longer are, so that the self that vibrates with potential can emerge. This listening requires courage, but not heroic, grandiose courage. It's a silent courage, the courage to allow yourself to stop, to feel, to write down what you feel, to name what repeats itself, to look within, even if you don't yet understand everything. Because when you sustain this gaze, even without immediate answers, you begin to tune into the field where answers reveal themselves. And then, little by little, what was noise becomes direction. What was discomfort becomes a portal. What was repetition becomes choice. The call doesn't require you to know exactly where to go. It simply asks that you recognize where you can no longer remain. And when that clarity arrives, the path begins to form from the inside out, as if life were saying, now that you, the cracked vase metaphor, why some people listen and others don't. Imagine the universe pouring inspiration like a fine, constant, and silent rain. A rain that doesn't need to be asked for, that doesn't choose its terrain, that simply falls. Generous, subtle, available. Everyone receives it, but not everyone can retain it. Because there are those who, even surrounded by this rain, live with a cracked vessel. A vessel that doesn't hold water. An inner vessel that has been cracked by excessive urgency, excessive noise, excessive survival. And so, what is sacred flows away is lost. Those who live in the frequency of touching the heart are always on alert. They are always solving, running, trying. Silence bothers them. Pause frightens them. Deep feeling seems dangerous. And it is in this state of chronic escape that the call goes unheeded. Not because of absence, but because of excessive stimulation. Not because God doesn't speak, but because there is too much noise to hear. On the other hand, those who listen are no longer special. They're just emptier. They've learned to repair the vessel. They've learned that slowing down isn't laziness, that emptying isn't wasting time, that sustaining inner silence is often the only way to hear something beyond one's own thoughts. They don't stand out on the outside, but inside, there's space, there's depth, there's enough stillness for the water of inspiration to remain, nourish, and flourish. The call is not a reward, it's a responsibility, a vibrational responsibility. It doesn't come to confirm that someone is better. It comes because someone made themselves available. Someone created space. Someone held the void. Someone stopped running. And by stopping, began to feel. Living with a whole vessel doesn't mean the absence of pain. It means being present with pain. It means not letting emotional cracks leak out what's essential. It means, above all, having the courage to be silent in a world that venerates noise. Having the courage to listen when everything invites distraction. Having the courage to realize that there's nothing external preventing the call from arriving, only internal resistances that prevent it from remaining. And when this listening becomes real, the calling no longer needs to be sought. It begins to manifest itself in the form of clear intuition, in the form of reasonless peace, in the form of silent guidance. Because when the vessel is ready, the rain never fails. It Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, and the choice to live the calling. There's a choice you can't make with words. It happens silently, the moment something inside you decides to no longer repeat the old version of yourself. When, instead of continuing to feed what hurts, you begin to open yourself to what can flourish. This choice is more biological than you might imagine. Bruce Lipton shows us that even genes considered silent can be activated when the internal environment changes, when perception shifts, when the way you see yourself transforms. This transformation isn't metaphysical in the abstract sense, it's physical. Your body changes when your consciousness changes. Your internal chemistry reorganizes. Your cells hear the new message. Epigenetics reveals that the call isn't just a spiritual experience. It's an invitation for your body, your energy, your vibration to reattune, as if each thought aligned with purpose were a key that unlocks new genetic possibilities. New paths, new realities. Joe Dispenza goes further. He reminds us that living our calling is taking a quantum leap in identity. It's ceasing to define ourselves based on old stories. It's abandoning the narrative of "I am this way because I've always been this way." It's allowing ourselves to live from the future, no longer from memory. It's creating a new energetic signature that doesn't repeat the past, but vibrates in what has not yet been fully experienced, that which is waiting for your vibrational permission to manifest. This leap isn't easy, because it requires a kind of renunciation. A renunciation of familiar pain. A renunciation of an identity that has grown accustomed to fear. A renunciation of a comfort zone that, though uncomfortable, is familiar. But when this renunciation happens, something that can't be explained, only felt. It's the call ceasing to be a distant idea and becoming an internal presence, a silent compass, a certainty that doesn't depend on external guarantees. In the end, it all comes down to a simple question. Are you available? Not perfect, not ready, just available. Available to realize that the calling isn't a finish line. It's the first step. A step that begins when you stop looking outside and start perhaps responding in that moment. You realize it was never about being chosen by something greater. It was always about remembering that this greater something already lives within you, and that it was only waiting for your inner yes, a yes that isn't spoken with the mouth, but that vibrates with the soul. And when that yes happens, the extraordinary no longer needs to be sought, because it becomes part of who you are. The calling is not a privilege, it is a vibration. Perhaps the biggest misconception about the calling is that it is something granted, like a prize reserved for those who have reached a certain level of consciousness, a blessing granted to a select few. But the truth is simpler and more profound. The calling is not a divine exception. It is a frequency, a vibration that constantly pulsates in the field, just waiting to be tuned in. And like all frequencies, it doesn't choose. It simply resonates with that which it is in harmony with. You don't need to be perfect to tune into this vibration. You don't need to have all the answers, nor a flawless past. The calling doesn't require a spiritual curriculum. It requires presence. It requires openness. It requires the courage to silence the noise of the world, to hear the most intimate sound of your soul. Because while you wait for something extraordinary, you may not realize that the extraordinary already speaks to you every day, through the ordinary, the simple, the repetitive, the seemingly small to be divine. There's a hidden beauty the moment you stop searching, when you stop demanding proof, signs, certainties. And finally, you begin to listen to what's already there. The intuition that insists, the synchronicity that repeats itself, the emotion that overflows without explanation. All of this is the call trying to touch your consciousness, not with spectacle, but with truth, with lightness, with presence. When you stop looking for extraordinary signs, something shifts within. You begin to realize that the extraordinary has always spoken in silence. It has always manifested itself between the lines of life, in encounters that transform, in separations that liberate, in cycles that end with more wisdom than pain. The call is not an event, it is a memory, a reminder of what you already knew before you forgot. a vibration that belongs to your essence and that simply needed to be heard again. And it's in that moment, when everything seems the same on the outside, but something ignites inside, that you understand. The calling isn't something that comes. It's something that awakens. It doesn't arrive from outside. It emerges from the quietest place in your soul. And when that happens, the path stops being sought, because you become the path itself, and everything that seemed distant begins to happen. Not by magic, but by vibrational coherence. You were chosen, not because of privilege, yes, but because at this very moment you are available. And that is all.